So we're a year and change away from the 2024 US presidential election. And I'm going to say if this was business as usual, I think Trump has a really good chance of winning. I would put it in the 60 to 70% chance of winning. Because there's so many things going against Joe. The situation is actually way worse for him than I thought it was going to be. I mean, if we ignore the fact the public has the attention span of the goldfish, we have the Afghanistan thing, we have the bad economics, the hyperinflation, rent going through the roof. We have rising crime rate all across the country, drugs, border crisis. America's lost a lot of prestige around the world because of Biden's incompetence. You also have all the big guy related scandals, which are I've never seen anything like that in my lifetime. The sheer number of just shady business dealings and corrupt bargains and just insane stuff in the Hunter Biden emails is mind boggling. Like, you could spend a decade going through all that stuff and still be finding new. It looks like some of the Republicans are forcing them to actually investigate it and open up impeachment proceedings. Now, there's a 0% chance Biden's going to be impeached. If they couldn't impeach Trump, then they aren't going to be able to impeach Biden. But I just want all that stuff to come out. Like, there's so much stuff. They can easily drag this for the entirety of next year. Just corrupt business dealing after corrupt business dealing, email after email talking about the big guy, all the other stuff. Like, they've got it. They've got it. I think that the indictment of Trump has, if not backfired, I don't think it was the silver bullet they thought. I think they overplayed their hand. While maybe if they thought Biden was going to lose, maybe indicting Trump wasn't the worst idea. But the way they went about it, this hysterical, just filing as many lawsuits and as many charges against him as possible, and hoping that they stick, I don't think was particularly effective. If anything, I feel like they made it so blatantly political that a lot of people who might have been kind of on the fence about it or said, yeah, Trump, we can't have a criminal as president, are at this point going, no, no, it's bullshit. The whole thing is just complete nonsense. So I don't think that necessarily makes him incapable of winning re-election. From my understanding, even if he gets convicted, he can still run for office. It might be cool. He might be running the free world from his jail cell, kind of like some drug kingpins do. That would be base. That would be really cool. I want to see that, like a reality show about Trump running the country from his prison cell. We can hope, we can dream. But my point is, Trump's coming back with a lot of good messaging. He's talking about getting out the vote. It looks like he's learned some lessons from last time. So if this was business as usual, if this was a normal election, I'd say 60-70% chance he wins. Things were looking good. Now, if we take ethics in video game journalism into consideration, I still think Biden is by far the favorite to win the presidential election. However, the bigger the margin that Trump would have won by, the more ethics in video game journalism needs to be violated. The more review bombing there has to be, the more deleting of forum accounts, the more anonymous reviews posted on Metacritic to lower the score, all kinds of stuff like that. And if it gets to a certain level, then even the skeptical people will have to go, these game reviews seem a little bit high. Is Zoe Quinn still sleeping around to get inflated reviews, or whoever the feminist of the day is? I think people might start asking those questions. So even if we're going to take the standpoint that because of a lack of ethics in video game journalism, the Biden game will just inevitably sell better than the Trump game, the more they have to correct it, the worse that it's going to look. So we got that. The big wild card, though, and the thing I think Biden's real last chance, if we're just going to treat this as a normal election, is Project Ukraine, is the whole Ukraine war, which is I'm worried about. I don't know what they're gonna do. I don't know where they're gonna go with this whole thing. So let's just take a moment and take a peek at the situation. For the last like 6 months, we were told about the big counteroffensive. If you, and this is not me being sarcastic, this is me more or less quoting Western sources. Ukraine was going to smash through the Russian lines. Their soldiers were going to run away and not fight. They were going to reach the Sea of Azov. They were going to cut the land bridge to Crimea. Crimea was going to surrender. Russia was going to collapse. Some people were talking about partitioning Russia, like forcing Russia to pay war reparations. Disaster. I mean, in my opinion at least, even if we are going to say that Ukraine made some gains or they mauled the Russian army or it was more inconclusive or it was more a draw, I think we can all agree that Ukraine took immense casualties in this entire offensive. It lost a lot of equipment. And I don't really see, regardless of how you think this went, how they're going to be able to launch another offensive anytime soon. Just in terms of having to retrain all that manpower that died or got wounded, they have to get more artillery, more tanks, more infantry fighting vehicles. A lot of that stuff still needs to be built in the West. I've seen some people say, oh, we'll start sending you stuff again by mid 2024. Maybe 2025 is when we'll have our production fully ramped up. So even best case scenario that this was like that Russia did take more casualties, that the Russian army got badly mauled and is in no state to launch their own offensive. The Ukrainian army isn't either. They don't have the resources to break through the Russian lines of defense and reach the Sea of Azov. And the idea that it's going to end in the next 12 months seems very dubious to me. We have winter coming up. We have, well, cold winter. So I've heard different things. Some people say that makes offensives easier because it hardens the ground. Some people say it just makes offensives impractical. We have the fall and spring rains. So who knows when we'll get to the next major offensive? It could be this winter. It could be a year from now, next July. My point being is it seems very unlikely this whole thing is going to get resolved in the next year prior to the election. Russia, even if it has an advantage, is very casualty averse and very willing to put up with prolonged warfare if it limits their casualties and maximizes their material advantage versus Ukraine. They're willing to wait it out. They're willing to fight this war of attrition until they feel they're in a position to. I'm not sure what their plan is. If it's just to wait until the Ukrainian army is completely exhausted and then just sweep in and smash everything, or to just start going methodically, kilometer by kilometer, I don't know. But as I said, I think most of us can agree that this thing doesn't look like it's going to be finished anytime soon. And so this leads us to 2024. And Biden, this is his baby. This is Project Ukraine. This is what he's put all his eggs in this basket. I mean, he has to succeed with this. He's got a lot of Republicans who are like, Joe, where did the money go? And there's like this recent thing where they fired the defense minister of Ukraine because he was corrupt and he pocketed all the money and resources, but now the money that's going to Ukraine is actually going to go to the right sources. Now it's going to. But we have hundreds of billions of dollars in checks that have been cashed. The U.S. has cleared out a large amount of its weapons that are going to have to be refilled. At the moment, they're starting to send, I think it's ATACMS, which they actually need for their war against China. But I think the story they came up with was they recounted and they found a whole bunch of ATACMS they didn't know about previously, which raises a lot of just kind of questions that the U.S. has, like, all these missiles just lying around and they forgot they were even there. But that's a whole other story. But yeah, their military, it's just kind of hollowed out. They don't have the stuff to send to Ukraine to end this war in the next year. I've heard them say maybe 2024, maybe 2025, we'll be able to rebuild the Ukrainian army, and then we can have another counteroffensive, and this time it's going to end. So, this is a long, rambling way of saying what does Biden do about this? If the election comes around, this whole thing is a complete and total debacle. Um, the front lines aren't moving, or Ukraine's gradually losing, or Russia's on the offensive, um, it's going to hurt Biden. I mean, because he's made it this thing. Trump said that he's going to negotiate a treaty to end this. He's going to get a good deal. And the more time goes on, the more just treasure and equipment and mental energy that's thrown into this, the more war weary the U.S. public is going to be, because they have to hear about this in the 24-hour news cycle. And to be honest, I wouldn't wish watching CNN on my worst enemy, let alone their coverage of this particular geopolitical crisis. But my point is, once again, if this isn't resolved, if this is just kind of a clusterfuck, especially if Russia wins. I don't know how we even define winning at this standpoint, but if Russia is steadily making progress, the Ukrainians are getting pushed back on a daily basis, they're forced to make a humiliating peace treaty, Biden's forced to come to terms with the Russians on terms that are favorable to them. I don't really get how he wins re-election, because, like I said, he's put everything into this, and if it doesn't succeed, then he's done. So the question is, what are they going to do about it? What are they going to do about Project Ukraine? Because things don't look like they're going that good. They're not going to get resolved in time for the election. They probably aren't going to look good in time for the election. So how does Biden try to deal with this? So I put up a poll. The three main options that we have at the moment are they cut and run. That's number one. If they're going to do that, they have to do that soon. They have to go and say, look, Zelensky, we think you're a cool guy. We gave you everything, but we're going to throw you under the bus now. We're going to say you're corrupt. We're going to say that you screwed the war up, that you didn't use combined arms, that you didn't use NATO tactics, that you should have won, that we gave you everything you needed, but you just didn't, and it's your fault, and we take no responsibility for it. And just throw him under the bus, and throw, I don't know, maybe Milley under the bus and the European allies, and basically just blame everybody else for this complete disaster, and leave Ukraine to its fate, and hope that the American people forget by next November, which, to be fair, they probably would. I mean, the public has a memory span of a goldfish, and if you have like 90% of the media running interference for you, that's pretty helpful. So I think that is one thing that could happen. I don't think it's going to happen, but that is a possibility. The second possibility, which is slightly more likely, but I'm unsure about, is escalation. That is, we give Ukraine, I don't know, F-22s, we give them more F-16s, we give them more tanks, somehow we give them like the most advanced weapons, maybe we send in volunteer brigades, we send in volunteer pilots, we hire mercenaries, we have some NATO expeditionary force or some madness like that, and the war just escalates. And they double down on it, and they try to force a win through for Ukraine, perhaps up to and even including direct warfare with Russia, at least in a like an expeditionary force fashion, kind of like what we had during the Korean War. That's option two. I don't think that's super likely to happen, but it's possible. I think it's more possible than just abandoning Project Ukraine at this point. And then we have the third option, which most people voted on, and that, as of recording this video, looks like might be happening, where Blinken and Ursula, what's her name, and basically a bunch of Boris Johnson, a bunch of Western diplomats and important people have gone to Ukraine in the last couple days and had long talks with Zelensky. So the current thinking, and this is starting to be floated and starting to appear in some of the establishment media, is we're going to have to freeze the conflict. This is going to be like Korea 2.0. we didn't win the war, we didn't lose the war. No, actually, the narrative I heard is we won the war because the war was about Russia conquering all of Ukraine. They didn't conquer all of Ukraine, so therefore we won the war. Whether or not that was ever Russia's overall objective, it doesn't matter. We stopped them, so it's victory for us. And we're going to freeze the conflict. We're going to keep the battle lines where they are, and we're going to like have some sort of ceasefire that doesn't acknowledge Russia's gains, that just basically says, okay, well, Russia has the territory occupied, but they don't have a legal right to it. We're not going to recognize it. And we're just going to set the whole thing off until after the election. Or we're going to promise that, yeah, we're going to rebuild Ukrainian army again. And maybe in like 3 or 4 years, they'll be able to fight Russia again and we'll kick Russia out. And they'll just try to obfuscate and delay and pretend that there's a stalemate and try to make it hold the lines where they are. And as far as we can tell, that's probably what's going to happen. Is they're trying to prevent this from being a defeat, trying to keep it to a situation they can still spin as a win or a draw until the election, and then after the election, they just drop Ukraine or they escalate. But the goal is to keep this from being a complete disaster for the Biden administration. And like I said, it's helpful when you have the media who just runs interference for you 24/7. But there's always a possibility that that's not going to be the case. Maybe Russia even decides to try to influence the U.S. election by trying to win a decisive victory over Ukraine next summer. That's possible. If Ukraine faces a big setback on the field and Biden's unable to do anything about it, it's going to embarrass him and it's going to make the situation better for Trump. As Trump's the peace candidate who said this whole thing is a mess. And honestly, I mean, what else are people going to do at this point in time other than give Trump a chance to resolve this whole thing? So that's where I think we're headed. I don't really know for sure. This whole thing is fucking weird. As I've said, it's the Ukraine cinematic universe. Literally anything can happen. My guess would be that we're going to try to drag this out somehow into a stalemate. Maybe do some backdoor negotiation with Russia. But on the whole, I think that's where we're headed. I do think the signs indicate to me now, unless something crazy happens, war weariness is going to set in America by this time next year. And if the thing's still not going very well, it's definitely going to hurt Biden in the polls. Like I said, barring something insane or gross lack of ethics in video game journalism, I do think Trump's probably going to win this election, maybe by a significant amount. But we've had so many insane things happen lately. I still think realistically Biden's going to win. I hope that makes sense. Anyways, I hope you found the video interesting. God bless, and I'll talk to you all again real soon.